In this video, I am going to be ranking the studio albums of legendary post-punk, new wave, however you want to categorize them, but legendary band Talking Heads. Talking Heads came to prominence in the late 70s and early 80s. I first was introduced to them when their video on MTV, Once in a Lifetime, was broadcast, and I remember thinking, I've never seen anything like this. Like, what in the heck? It was just such a quirky video. David Byrne with his thick Coke bottle glasses on, just kind of doing these strange movements, and the way he was jerking his body around and sweating. It was just such a feast for the eyes. And I remember just sitting there like speechless. How do you even react to something like that? But they were more than just a new wave band. They really expanded the boundaries of what music, popular music, could sound like. They were definitely, at least at the start, they kind of remind me a lot of Television, but they were doing the similar things that the Pretenders were doing. They had that sort of similar punk spirit as like the Police and some of those bands like Elvis Costello, some of those bands that were really coming to prominence in the late 70s and transforming punk into new wave. But anyway, I digress. I'm going to go through each of their studio albums from my least favorite to my favorite, starting with number 8, and that is going to be True Stories. True Stories was released in 1986, and it definitely suffers from overproduction. That 80s drum sound, just kind of that sterile pop 80s production that everybody fell victim to in the middle of the 80s. Love for Sale was a big hit. Wild Wild Life was another big hit off of there. But those are really, for me, the only two highlights. Papa Legba has its moments, but then it falls back into that just sterile 80s production. And that's my problem with the album, is it's just so, unfortunately, Talking Heads fell into that cookie cutter. We're going to cut an album, we're going to have these big 80s processed drum sounds, everything's going to sound over produced, it's just a mess. And unfortunately, it's not enjoyable to listen to. The songs are not bad. Had they been produced in a different way, maybe they'd be a little more enjoyable. But nonetheless, at the bottom, gotta rank True Stories. Next, I am gonna go with Naked, 1988. And this was, at least it was better than True Stories. My problem with Naked is that it doesn't sound like it's the Talking Heads. It sounds like it's David Byrne and a bunch of world musicians. It just feels like the whole album got swallowed up in this whole world music, exotic band. The music's fine. It's just, it doesn't sound like it's Talking Heads anymore. It feels like a David Byrne solo album almost. I like Blind, Mr. Jones, Totally Nude. The rest of it, it's just a little, again, busy. And, I appreciate that it was definitely better than True Stories was, but I can't really think of it much as a Talking Heads album. I know it was their last one, and it was definitely in the direction that David Byrne's solo career went, but for me, it's just, it feels like the Talking Heads kind of got taken over by the other musicians on the album. Number 6, Little Creatures. Little Creatures, it's poppy. It's definitely more in a commercial vein. You've got And She Was, which was a pleasant little pop tune. It's charming. I really like Stay Up Late. It's kind of a cool, I like it's got a heavy drum sound, and it's just sort of David Byrne talking about, you know, playing with a little baby. And, you know, it's got its moments, but there's still enough charm to it. There's still enough personality here. You know, I like Creatures of Love, I think is very cool. Road to Nowhere is a great track. Television Man, I think is great. It's a longer track, but I don't know. There's something about that track that I like a lot. I like the middle section where they kind of go off into a little bit of jamming there. Just very cool. I like this album a lot. It's got some 80s production, but nowhere near the amount that True Stories does. And I like this album a lot. I feel bad I got to rank it so low, but, you know, again, every album's got to fall somewhere, and that one is just a little lower than the others. Number 5, Remain in Light, the album that spawned the first big introduction to MTV for many people, which was Once in a Lifetime, and David Byrne acting all silly and quirky. Still love that video, although it's very much a product of its times. But this is, in contrast to Naked, this doesn't feel like there's too much going on. Like, it's still the Talking Heads, but they're branching out. I mean, this was a bold step for them to take. There was some different types of rhythms and textures that were on Fear of Music, but this totally is like, we're all in. They totally abandoned the sound of their first 2 albums, and some of the more palatable music that was on Fear of Music, and just totally went off on different rhythms. And there's not really a single rock song on here. I mean, the closest thing might be Once in a Lifetime, Cross-Eyed and Painless a little bit, but it's definitely a bold move in a new direction. Like, we're going to totally, you know, we're going to introduce new rhythms, and we're going to introduce new sonic textures and new sounds and a new way of presenting our song. So you got to give them a lot of credit for that. I admire this album a lot. And certainly I like the albums that came before, and I like the album that came after, but it's got its own unique place in the Talking Heads canon. The next album, number 4, Speaking in Tongues. Really like this a lot. This has Burning Down the House, Making Flippy Floppy. It was almost a little bit of dance. I don't want to go as far as to say disco, but there's some really cool danceable rhythms on here. Making Flippy Floppy is great. Girlfriend is Better, I like a lot. Slippery People, I Get Wild. It's just got a neat, cool rhythm to it. And it's sort of a step in a more commercial direction from Remain in Light. It's just got very cool. There's some elements of world music, but it's also very exotic. Exotic might be the best way to describe Speaking in Tongues. And I like Moon Rocks a lot. It's just kind of a real cool, almost like, I feel like that's an album. If I were to be on safari, that's the song, for whatever reason, I would listen to. Almost B-52's album that David Byrne produced, Mesopotamia, I believe was right around the same time, and they're almost like sister albums, because B-52's changed their sound up for Mesopotamia, and Speaking in Tongues is there's some of the same rhythms. It's just a cool album to have on in the background, and that's why one of the reasons Talking Heads were one of the coolest bands of the late 70s and early 80s, because an album like this, each album is different from the next, and they each have a different rhythm, and like, This Must Be the Place is just such a cool, uplifting, breezy, gentle, reassuring song. It's one of my favorite Talking Head tracks, and it closes out Speaking in Tongues. Just fantastic. Number 3, Talking Heads 77, their first album when they burst upon the scene, and it's Talking Heads at their most punkest, at their most punk, I guess is what I'm trying to say. Talking Heads at their most punk. It's got their most quirky early punk tracks. You can tell they're still finding their sound, and it's just, David Byrne is such a unique character, and his personality shines all the way through here. But the band, it's not just all about David Byrne, it's the band, you know, Tina and Jerry and Chris backing him up and just lending such a great palette of sounds behind David Byrne. And it's just a great, great album. The songs on here are fantastic. I mean, obviously, you've got the classic Psycho Killer on here, which is just a total bass groove. You've got Pulled Up, which is just kind of a frenetic, jangly guitar pop song. New Feeling is great. No Compassion, the book I read. It's just such a great pop album at, you know, sort of the end of the punk movement, or the tail end of that punk movement, and really Talking Heads defining what new wave would sound like. A great, great album. Number 2, the follow-up album, their number 2 album, More Songs About Buildings and Food. Love this even better than the first album. I feel it's an even stronger effort than the first album. Just, again, the sounds, the atmosphere that they lend, it's just different with every song. And what they get out of their instruments and the rhythms and the melodies and everything about these songs are just so fantastic. With Our Love, Warning Sign, Found a Job is just so great. What they do on the guitar and what they do with the bass and the rhythm, it's just fantastic. Artists Only, Take Me to the River, the Al Green cover, was the most radio-friendly hit on here and a great track. Just love the big country with that. Just roll. It's just such an atmospheric song. I love the guitar work on there, and just David's lyrics and his vocal. It's just such a laid back, I don't want to say country tune, but if you have not checked this album out, make sure you do, because it is just brilliant. And then number 1, my favorite Talking Heads album of all time is the brilliant Fear of Music. A step away from their first 2 albums, which were fantastic, and they upped the ante and they upped the quality. Everything about this is so great, so much. Their foot still in the, you know, the post-punk. The first 2 albums, you know, it's not such a leap from the first 2 albums that it's a jarring experience, but they definitely are expanding their sound. They're maturing as songwriters and musicians, and it just shows on here. So many great tracks. Mind, which I'm surprised more R&B or rap artists haven't covered, because that would just, that rhythm in there would be such a fantastic sample. Paper is great. Cities is a great chugging disco rhythm. You can dance to it if you want to. It's great. Life During Wartime is a great track. Air, I think, is fabulous. Just great. And just quirky keyboards, quirky bass, quirky guitars. Just everything about it is so great. Heaven, Simply Red covered it. It's a great, almost a ballad, I guess you might say, as close as Talking Heads ever got to a ballad, even though it's not a love song. It is cool. Electric Guitar. Drugs is just a haunting, dark, stark, Paranoid, just sort of a disconcerting track. Just love it at the end of it. Just got so much, almost like an industrial rhythm to it. Just great. This whole album is great. Talking Heads are great. Hope you like this video. Hope you agree with my list. If you don't, that's cool too, but I'd love to know, what are your favorite Talking Head tracks? How would you rank their 8 studio albums? I could talk about Talking Heads forever. They're awesome. Let me know what you think. As always, thanks for watching and take care.